From Michael Schumacher having to be restrained during his confrontation with David Coulthard, to Nico Rosberg getting booed on the podium after his altercation with Lewis Hamilton, here are some F1 legends who absolutely hated each other. Michael Schumacher coming to blows with David Coulthard is a nice way to start things off. Now, there might be only one incident between them, but it's fiery enough to make the list. Imagine this. Both drivers were racing at the Spa in 1998 in extremely tough conditions. David Coulthard slammed into a wall early on. It caused one of the biggest first-lap pileups in F1 history. Luckily, Coulthard was back for the restart of the race in a spare car. Following another crash, which ended pole sitter Mika Häkkinen's race, who was going head-to-head with Schumacher, things got really interesting. Suddenly, the German legend was on course for a dominant victory. But when he came to a lap-up with Coulthard, everything went south. There was already some tension between the two teams, and when Coulthard slowed down on the racing line, actually to let Schumacher pass, Schumacher ended up hitting the back of the Scot because his vision had been impeded by a thick spray. That ended the leader's race, as the Ferrari's front wheel was taken apart. As the two drivers went off the tracks, Schumacher stormed into the McLaren pits to confront David and had to be restrained by the mechanics on track in fear of further escalation. But this wasn't the only time hatred on the track spilled off track. Because I think everyone knows about the ongoing feud between Lewis Hamilton and Nelson Piquet. Now, these two weren't exactly rivals at any time in their professional careers, considering Piquet retired nearly 1.5 decades before Hamilton joined Formula One. As an analyst, he's been very critical of the British legend. In fact, recently, he insulted Hamilton using homophobic and racist words in an interview, and even went on to criticize him for the way he lost the 2016 championship to Nico Rosberg. Hamilton asked for a change in these archaic mindsets, and while Piquet apologized, he also added that his comments may have been mistranslated. Not sure if people buy that because it's not the first time he's made such comments. He was ordered to pay nearly $1 million to Hamilton in moral damages. But that's not the only time Hamilton's been in a controversy. Who can possibly forget his rivalry with Fernando Alonso? These two are still going strong, and might not have the same kind of red-hot rage for one another now, but back during their McLaren days, it reached boiling point fairly quickly. Alonso had welcomed Hamilton as a newcomer. However, even he couldn't have predicted just how good the Brit would be, with both going head-to-head for the championship in his very first season. Soon, they realized that they were both obstacles in each other's way. At the Hungaroring, Alonso did his best to impede Hamilton long enough for failure during the qualifying lap. And when Hamilton lost out to Alonso for pole position, the reaction was insane. In fact, years later, Ron Dennis, the then McLaren boss, revealed that it was Hamilton who threw the first blow in their rivalry, eventually leading to Alonso leaving his contract to rejoin Renault soon after. It was the right thing to do because their rivalry had allowed Kimi Räikkönen to win the title that year. But if the Hungarian GP was iconic for many reasons, you can't forget the 2013 Malaysian Grand Prix and the multi-2-1 incident, which was basically the fever pitch of tensions between Red Bull teammates Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber. After the 2010 Turkish Grand Prix, where the two teammates collided with one another, ending Vettel's race, a lot of drama behind the scenes unfolded, ultimately leading up to the infamous 2013 Malaysian Grand Prix. It wasn't a secret anymore that Webber and Vettel hated each other, but the team management only made matters worse by issuing a team order to hold station. Now, Webber had dominated the race and was on course for a well-deserved victory. But Vettel decided to disobey team orders in the final seconds, speeding ahead of Webber to take the victory. Later, he claimed that he'd been hired to win, and that's exactly what he did. Cold. So when Webber announced his retirement a few years later, he said that he won't miss Seb too much. Can you blame him? But there have been many more feuds between warring F1 teammates, like the little rivalry that Esteban Ocon and Sergio Perez had half a decade ago. They probably weren't racing for victories or championships during their time together. That doesn't mean tensions weren't extremely high whenever they took to the tracks. multiple collisions fractured their relationship completely. The first notable instance was in Baku in 2017, when the Mexican and Frenchman came together on a couple of occasions, damaging both cars with Perez having to retire from the race. That was followed by two extremely scary moments at the Spa, where they banged wheels at full pelt, before doing it all over again in nearly identical circumstances. Ocon would go on to claim that Perez tried to kill him. Perez later remarked that the rivalry in general was never great. It cost the team so much that they were banned from racing each other and their partnership was broken up, with Lance Stroll replacing the Frenchman. But it has nothing on the next one, the mutual hatred between Seb and Hamilton. The Brit found it hard to adjust to life after winning his first championship, because Vettel was virtually unbeatable from the beginning of the 2010 decade. Both drivers have talked about the psychological warfare they would often indulge in, and Christian Horner, the Red Bull chief, once noted that the two drivers despised each other. So, they should own the rivalry instead of hiding it. He even added that they've often come up with PR shows just to keep the FIA happy. But behind the scenes, things are a lot worse than they seem. The mask, of course, slipped on many occasions. Most memorably, at the 2017 Baku GP, there was a spot of road rage from Vettel against Hamilton. Vettel believed that he'd been brake-checked by Lewis's Mercedes, so he drew level before driving into him. That prompted a lot of criticism from Hamilton, who labeled the German a disgrace. Apologies were in order later, but it doesn't change the fact that they truly disliked each other, especially because Vettel lost out on his championship record to Hamilton. But during the Hamilton-Vettel era, there was another rivalry based on pure hatred in 2016, and that was between the two Mercedes teammates, Hamilton and Rosberg, also known as the Silver War because it got super intense. It was mostly prevalent from 2013 to 2016, when both drivers were dominating the sport, but their relationship was hardly that of teammates. They hated each other's guts and were even threatened with suspension at the height of their rivalries. From confrontations on and off the track, it wasn't a surprise that it was often compared to the Prost-Senna rivalry. But at least the Prost-Senna rivalry ended on a nice note, and they had respect for one another. As far as the two ex-Mercedes drivers are concerned, they have no relationship off the track, and they never really did. But throughout those 4 years, fans were treated to some spicy battles on track. The peak of their hatred came at the 2014 Belgian Grand Prix, when Rosberg hit Hamilton at Les Combes, putting Hamilton effectively out of the race while he recovered to finish second. Rosberg was actually booed at the podium and was forced to apologize as well. Then, at the 2016 Austrian Grand Prix, Rosberg was on course to a win when he experienced brake issues. That led to Hamilton closing in, and just as he got close, Rosberg went straight on, leading to a collision. The Brit somehow recovered to stay in the race, while Nico fell to fourth in the final corners. That led to a war of worlds. Toto Wolff, the team boss, was absolutely furious, calling both of them brainless, while the two blamed each other for instigating the incident. So, from Nico Rosberg and Hamilton's difficult partnership to Schumacher nearly hitting Coulthard, here were the F1 legends who hate each other.